All right, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, where we will be talking about the Therefore integration with Microsoft Teams. Before we get started, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Kono, Head of Digital Engagement here at Therefore, and I'm happy to be bringing you this webinar today about a topic that a lot of people have been asking about, has been recently made available, and that is the Therefore integration with Microsoft Teams. So before we jump into the content, just a quick reminder for everyone. All participants are muted in Zoom, but I would still like to answer any questions you may have. So please use the Q&A function for that. It should be towards the bottom of your screen. Please type your question there, and I will be happy to answer your questions at the end of the session. So what are we going to be looking at today? Well, there's 4 major agenda points that I'd like to discuss. Those are the licensing of the integration, the features and functions, the configuration and administration, and then we're going to take a look at 2 sample use cases. So there are 2 different videos that we're going to show you where you'll see the Therefore integration with Teams in action. The first thing we're going to review is the licensing. So I will say that the licensing for the Therefore integration with Teams is very simple and straightforward. It is not like other connectors with Therefore that require a separate license. It is generally available for every version, but there are a few restrictions. So we're going to be talking about this from the Teams and from the Therefore side. On the Teams side, a license to use Teams is required. Therefore, can't provide this for you, but as anyone who would want to use this integration will very likely have a Teams account, this should not be an issue. Just remember that you need to have an existing Teams license and account. When you actively use the Teams integration to interact with Therefore, that is, when you choose to view a document or process a workflow action, it's important to know that a Therefore user license is consumed. This license is assigned to the user that you chose to authenticate with. And we'll learn more about this later, but basically you just need to know that your Teams account doesn't need to be the same account as the one you use to log into Therefore. Important to remember is that the Therefore account you're linking to will need to consume a Therefore license at the point of use. If you have a named license, that's very easy. It just pulls the license as it normally would when you interact with Therefore. But remember that if you use a concurrent license, it will pull from your pool of concurrent licenses when you interact with the integration through Teams. The good news is that beyond the user license, there's nothing else required in Therefore. No additional or separate licenses needed, and the Teams integration works with any version of Therefore. But as a note, I do have to mention that as of December 2022, the integration is only available with the latest version of Therefore, which is version 28. Again, if you are using Therefore online, you don't have to worry about the version number. It doesn't really mean anything. It's always up to date. Therefore Online is always on the latest version. So if you have Therefore Online, you have this version. So the integration will work with you again right away. It has been scheduled to be released for on-premise systems with Therefore 2023, which is scheduled to be released in the spring of 2023. Let's now take a look at the features and functions that this integration with Teams provides. At the most basic level, the biggest thing that the integration does is let you know through Teams that you have a workflow task in Therefore. But not only do you get the notification, but you can actually process workflow tasks without leaving the Teams interface. So, what exactly is that about? The basics you need to know about how this works are that this is done through a dedicated app that you download through Teams. You don't install it separately, you just get it from the Teams app source. You don't get this from Therefore, you don't install it from Therefore, you actually get it through the Teams interface. Teams has an app store, which is very similar to, app store you would find on your phone. And the Therefore app is available there. By default, the Therefore app is available for public use, but please keep in mind that depending on the settings of the organization of the end user, administrator approval might be required before someone can add the Therefore app to his or her teams. By default, all certified apps are allowed, and of course the Therefore app is certified by Microsoft. That's why it's available in their app store as an official app. And if that is the case, an admin needs to explicitly allow the Therefore app in the Teams admin page. Again, this is nothing that a regular Teams user can do. You've got to get your Teams administrator to do it. Once you've got the app installed through Teams, the Teams user just needs to authenticate themselves in Therefore by logging in with their Therefore credentials. This is how the Teams part is synced with the Therefore part. As I mentioned earlier, the account you use for Teams doesn't have to be the same one you use for Therefore. Different organizations have different levels of single sign-on, integration, and federation, and it may be the case that your organization will use the same account for both Teams and Therefore. However, a user would most likely, in most scenarios, have a dedicated separate account they'd need to use to log in. And after that authentication, it stays linked until the user decides to sever the connection and log out. So there's a number of things that the integration can do for you. First is that you receive notifications when a new workflow task is assigned to you. This works both in the desktop and mobile Teams apps. So what happens is you are basically speaking to a bot. It just creates another chat with the Therefore app, and this will pop up the little notification dialog we all know from Teams when you get a new message. Only this will be a message from the Therefore app telling you that you have a new workflow task. And remember that this works with any Teams client you use, whether it's installed web or mobile. This is because the Therefore app, like I mentioned, just creates a new chat as if you were talking to another person in a separate conversation on Teams. The notification includes a ton of information about the workflow task. You'll hear us refer to this part, to the notification about a new workflow, as a card, which is the technical name for it. So the information that the Therefore app is sending to you as a message on Teams is going to be referred to as a card. What can you do with this card? You can view relevant index data. You can open documents for viewing, either in the Therefore web client or just simply open them for viewing. You can add additional workflow information, and you can perform available workflow actions, such as accepting, rejecting, or any other next steps that are configured in the workflow. If you choose an option that is not possible due to missing conditions, the app will inform you of this. Once you process the task, you also receive a confirmation of processed tasks. And if there are additional paths, for example, to process a conflict in the workflow, these options can also be processed directly in the app. So again, all the same rules that apply in your workflow apply here as well. So it is polling the workflow on the server to make sure you are following whatever configured rules you have on the server for the workflow. I mentioned earlier that you can also view the document in the web client. Once you're viewing the document, you can also process the task from within that interface as you normally would. So as we see here, if I choose to view the document, I can process the task in the web client instead of in Teams. This is synchronized immediately, so when you return to the Teams chat, it will already show you that you've processed it. The app in this way stays constantly up to date with the latest state of the workflow because it receives the information directly from the server. Let's now take a look at the configuration and administration of the integration with Teams. Getting started with the Teams integration is easy. However, I mentioned it before, and I'm going to mention it again. Your organization needs to allow its Teams users to install apps, or at least specifically the Therefore app. The Therefore app is certified by Microsoft and is thus allowed by default, but different organizations may have different rules. If you can't find or can't install the Therefore app in Teams, please talk to your Teams administrator first to make sure that this is allowed. This first step needs to be done by the Therefore system administrator. A regular user cannot do this. So in this step, you need to go into the Therefore Solution Designer, which is essentially the administrative client in Therefore. Again, a regular user cannot do this. This has to be an administrator in Therefore. But at least what they have to do is very easy. All they have to do is enable OAuth 2 connections and add the Therefore Teams connector. All of this information will be filled out. The admin just has to click Add here and select the Teams connector here because it's already a pre-configured connection. So all you have to do is just add it. There's no additional information to enter. Starting with this step, everything else is done by the Teams, or therefore user in this case. An administrator is not needed for these following steps. This is done on an individual level by users who want to make use of the integration. First, you have to install the Therefore app through the Teams interface. So normally on the Teams interface, on the left-hand side, at least on the desktop client, there are additional options, and one of them is to search for an app. So simply searching for Therefore will let you find the Therefore app, and you'll have to go ahead and add it. Then you're connecting to your Therefore system. So the first step in this is to enter the tenant name. So this is the name of the tenant, not the entire URL, just the first part, which is the tenant name of your Therefore online system. The app then asks you to authorize to subscribe to workflow notifications. So you go ahead and click authorize. You log in with your Therefore credentials, not your Teams credentials, with your Therefore credentials to make this connection and to synchronize. And that's it. Then the app informs you that you're connected to your tenant and are subscribed to workflow notifications. There's also an option to view a set of available commands, and typing help into the chat is an easy way to review these different settings that you have control over with the app. Beyond connecting, you can also subscribe or unsubscribe. Unsubscribe, I will say, is not the same as disconnecting. It's just essentially putting the app on silent mode. You won't receive notifications as long as you are unsubscribed, but you will stay connected. Set viewer is a useful one because it allows you to change which viewer is used to show you the document when you choose to view a document from the Teams chat. And set language allows you to change the language that the app uses to communicate with you in the chat. So we've reached the part of the webinar where now we're going to take a look at some videos. This first video shows you a step-by-step walkthrough of the configuration that we reviewed. It also shows a simple use case at the end for processing vacation requests. After this video, we'll come back and take a look at a second use case scenario.
The Therefore integration with Microsoft Teams. Once your system administrator has prepared the tenant, you can install the Therefore app in Teams. Click the three dots and type Therefore. Then select Add to add the Therefore connector for Microsoft Teams. Next, enter the name of your tenant. This is the first part of the connection URL. Select Authorize and then enter your username and password and select Sign In. Then select Grant to grant permissions to allow Therefore to communicate with Teams. Now the Therefore integration with Microsoft Teams is ready to use. A few handy commands allow you to change or refresh settings. Simply type Help to get started. The commands are Connect, Subscribe, Unsubscribe, Set View, and Get Status. If we type Subscribe, we can check the subscription status, and if we want to stop receiving notifications, we type Unsubscribe. It's also worth noting that you can change the viewing settings by default or simply view the document. Now it's time to start processing Therefore workflows in Teams. To get started, let's start the workflow. We start the workflow for the holiday request. You can see that as soon as the workflow is assigned to us, we'll get a chat message in Teams telling us that we have a new workflow. When I open the message, I can view the document, view all the index data associated with the document. If I click View Document, the document will open in the Therefore viewer. I can then process it directly in the Therefore viewer as normal, and the Teams chat will be updated to show the task has been processed in Therefore. I can then open the document again from Teams and see that it was processed. You'll notice that no more workflow tasks are assigned to me. And if I open the workflow history, you'll see that the workflow has ended. Now I'll show you what it's like to process the workflow task directly in Teams. This time I'll initiate the workflow from the Therefore Classic web client. As soon as the workflow is started, I'll get a chat from Teams. I'll open it. Once again, I can view the document and select to approve or reject the holiday request. I can also add additional information for other users. In this case, no replacement is available for Julia Bell, so I'll reject her vacation request. I can then view the document in the web client, and that's it. You can see it's really fun and easy to use the new Teams connector.
All right. In this next part, we're going to look at another sample use case. However, in this case, we are not going to focus on the configuration. We're going to jump straight into the use case. This additional scenario, to set some context for you, is about HR recruiting. We're going to be looking at a longer workflow process, which has multiple steps. In this case, we will be seeing 3 people, 3 workflow processors who are participating in this multi-step workflow to review applications that come in and recruit a candidate. Each of the 3 will use the Therefore integration with Teams, but they'll each do it in a slightly different way. So let's go ahead and take a look at the video, and when we come back, we'll review the summary and benefits of the topics we discussed today. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a use case scenario for the Therefore integration with Microsoft Teams. We'll be looking at a workflow that is handling HR recruiting. We'll be looking at the perspective of 3 different users who are involved in this workflow. That means 3 different users will approach handling workflow tasks in 3 different ways, all using the integration with Microsoft Teams. The workflow has started, and our user is about to receive the notification in Teams. He clicks to the Teams bot, and here he sees already the first card that is sent by the Therefore Teams integration. The card is full of information about the document and the workflow. So if we take a look, we can see all of the pertinent information about the applicant here. This is Samira from the United States applying for the role of sales representative. We have some instructions for the task, which are to review the application and choose to either schedule an interview or reject the application. Of course, before we make this decision, we have to review the document. So let's open the document for viewing. We can now view the application. Scrolling through, this is the dynamic web viewer in Therefore. We can take a look at the application. In this case, for example, we want to highlight her experience at Timmerman Industries. So we may want to ask her more about that. So let's go back into Teams, and under additional information, I'm going to enter this for the next processor. I'll write, ask about the experience that this candidate had with Timmerman Industries, and that's in the additional information box. And then I'm going to select my option, which is to interview the candidate. At this point, the Therefore card confirms for me that the document has been processed and that the workflow task has moved on to the next step. Now it's time for the second person to process. So the first person agreed to interview the candidate. This is now going to pass to the person who will actually be conducting the interview. So this person is also using the Therefore integration with Teams to be notified of their role in this workflow, but they're going to do things a little bit differently. So here comes the notification. Let's take a look. Again, we see all the information that we need about the candidate, and we see the instructions for the task, which are to review and schedule a first round interview. We also see the additional information that was left by the previous processor. So let's take a look now. A difference already here is that this user is not using the Therefore Dynamic Web Viewer, but rather they're using the classic web client, which we are all familiar with and has been around in Therefore for a very long time. We're going to take a look, and let's just fast forward a bit and say that we interviewed the candidate. At this point, we're going to add some additional notes maybe. Perhaps the interview didn't go as well as we expected it to go. So this now processor is going to add some information about some doubts they had about the candidate. Going to click Save, and then we're going to do something different. We're going to process this not in Teams, but rather in the classic web viewer, as we would normally do, even if we weren't working with the Teams integration. Once we get back to Teams, we can see that from the card that the workflow has been processed. This has been updated in Teams, even though we processed the workflow in the Therefore classic web client. This final step is going to be the next and final person who's taking a look at this person's application through the workflow. This person is using still the Therefore integration with Teams, but they're doing it on their phone. So here we have the Teams app open, and we're about to receive the notification. So here comes the notification about a workflow task. We'll click on that. And we'll see, again, all the same information we saw before, except now we see a lot of additional information. We see everything that the previous reviewers had written. For example, the first note, which was about asking about the experience with Timmerman Industries, and then the note from the second person who did the first round interview, where they said the candidate showed some hesitancy and inexperience. So let's pretend that now I have done this interview here. I'm the user. I've done the face-to-face interview or the second round interview with Samira. Unfortunately, we're not happy with how the interview went, and we have decided not to make her an offer. In this case, I'm just going to use the Teams app to click reject, and I get a confirmation that the workflow has been processed, and it confirms to me that the workflow has ended. All right, so now that we've seen a few use cases about the Therefore integration with Teams, we hope that you have a better idea of what this looks like in real life and some multiple use cases to give you an idea of how it would be used and how it makes workflow processing easier. In conclusion, summary and benefits. The Therefore integration with Microsoft Teams lets you do a few things. 3 basic things. You can know when you have workflow tasks pending, you can open documents for viewing in Therefore, and you can process workflow tasks without leaving the Teams interface. The benefits, well, this helps you have instant visibility of your pending tasks, it helps you keep track of your work more easily, and it helps you use fewer hardware resources or install fewer apps on your device, because you don't have to install Therefore at all to use this. That's one less app or one less piece of software that you need to have on your device. I wanted to quickly mention, now that we've reached the end, something that perhaps not everyone has been informed about. And this is that Therefore was recently recognized as a global leader in the ECM industry. This was determined by Software Reviews, which is a division of the Infotech Research Group. They recently released their 2022 review of the ECM industry product offerings. And what they did was they looked at 14 different ECM systems on the market today and collected qualitative and quantitative data from real end users, businesses, and IT professionals. And I want to stress here that this was done based on feedback with confirmed users of the system. This was not one of those awards that is given out that is determined by closed doors, intransparent meetings of consultants. This was actually done based on feedback from customers out in the field. And again, certified, verified customers who participated in this. What the survey results found was that Therefore information management software earned a spot in the leader quadrant of the Software Reviews data quadrant, indicating that Therefore excels at providing both product features and satisfaction and quality vendor experience and capabilities. These were the factors that users were asked about when determining how they voted or how they rated each of the softwares that were in the running. Not only that, but Therefore also ranked number 1 among 14 different softwares. Therefore was rated number 1 for workflow automation, or as Software Reviews puts it, the extent to and ease of which actions within the system can be configured to be performed automatically. This is a great recognition of the efforts that our development team has put into developing the Therefore workflow engine. Workflow automation continues to be, of course, an incredibly useful tool across industries and departments, and we're proud, of course, to continue offering you the number 1 workflow automation solution on the market. And I think our latest integration with Teams, which actually arrived after this award was given, only strengthens Therefore's capabilities and excellence in workflow automation. But wait, there's more news. Not only was Therefore ranked first in workflow process automation, but 94% of reviewers, that is, again, real users and customers, plan to renew their use of Therefore. Also note that not one single reviewer was disappointed or dissatisfied with their purchase of Therefore, and that is really quality that you can count on. Before we finish for today, I wanted to leave you with some information about learning more about the integration. In the Therefore e-learning platform, we have refresher training available for version 28, which is when the Therefore Teams integration was made available. There are videos there that show you how to do basically everything that we've reviewed in this webinar, but of course more from an educational perspective. So if you really need to start using this integration, especially from an administrative point of view, definitely take a look at that. It's worth your time. It's very quick, but it gives you full details on how to set up and use the integration with Teams. And as always, I wanted to point out some resources if you want to learn more about Therefore. We have our website, our YouTube channel, our mailing list, blog, and the best way to keep in touch with Therefore is to follow us on LinkedIn. We're listed as Therefore Corporation. We post every 2 to 3 days, if not more often, and we have all the latest news available there. Well, I wanted to thank you then for joining. We hope you found this webinar informative and useful, and we'll see you on our next webinar. Thank you.